I am no fan of Marseille. Their marketing really rubs me the wrong way. But I can absolutely understand why the mClassic has such a vocal and committed fan base, and I push back when people call it snake oil, because it does do a thing. It changes how the picture looks in a way that I personally dislike, but maybe you do like, and that's okay. In short, the red mClassic HDMI dongle provides some sort of post-process anti-aliasing, smoothing, and sharpening to 480p, 720p, and 1080p sources, outputting them as 1080p, or 1440p if you jump through some hoops. But Marseille's latest products, the so-called RGB collection, demonstrate a fundamental lack of understanding about what constitutes a video game image that is either as intended or just like you remember.
Warning: images seen in this episode may shock or upset some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Supporting is a strong word, but I supported their Indiegogo so that I could make this video. I pledged for the tier that got me the two new products, the green one and the blue one, which were delivered in January 2025. The green one is meant very broadly for retro stuff that you have adapted to HDMI in some way or another, while the blue one is touted as being optimized for Nintendo Switch. But what are they actually supposed to do to the image? As I set out to answer that question, I quickly realized that these new mClassics have a bug, so I also had to figure out what is the correct or intended operation. As I flicked the switches between the various modes, the colors I was getting looked so profoundly wrong that I was convinced there was no way this could possibly be what I'm supposed to be seeing. I then discovered that the colors only go out of whack if you move the switch while it's powered on. If you turn off the USB power, move the switch, and then restore power, the colors are fine. So I was like, so this is what it's supposed to look like, and proceeded in that fashion for a while. But I soon noticed that on both the green and blue units, there appeared to be some sort of adaptive sharpening going on, which distractingly flickers on and off as the content of the image changes. It was then that I took a closer look at Marseille's marketing materials online and realized, oh no. The awful colors weren't an issue with input range or output range or my TV and capture card incorrectly handshaking with the devices. No, this is actually what Marseille is touting as, quote unquote, looks amazing. The mode with the good colors but the flickery adaptive sharpening, that was the bugged mode all along. It's not even supposed to be here. And yet, every time you power on the new mClassics, regardless of where you've left the mode switch, this is what you will be seeing. To get the intended results, you have to move the switch every single time it receives power or a fresh signal. Unbelievable. And to be clear, this is not an issue on the red mClassic I bought in 2022, only my green and blue ones. While the red mClassic has a pass-through mode represented by its first switch position, which does not light up, the green and blue units regrettably do not have a pass-through mode. So they do indeed have the typical Marseille image processing and upscaling when the switch is in the unlit position, which from here on I'll refer to as Mode 1. Luckily, in this mode, the colors and video levels are more or less as they should be. Marseille says that this is the same processing as the red mClassic. In reality though, these are not exactly like the processing modes on the red unit. When comparing the red mClassic against the green retro mClassic while using a 480p source, I would say that the green unit produces slightly smoother results with somewhat toned down sharpening artifacts. It's subtle, but for what it's worth, this is an improvement in my book. As for the blue unit's normal processing mode, the difference is a lot harder to see with the typical 720p or 1080p signal that you'd likely be sending it. Before I can get into the new modes exclusive to each unit, I have to call attention to just how frustrating it is that devices that are meant to be user-friendly require managing limited range and full range video levels from your sources, if you even have the ability to control that. All mClassics, including the red one, seem to only be capable of handling limited range input correctly, because otherwise shadow and highlight details will be lost. In these two examples, I was able to select both limited range and full range thanks to the PS1 Digital HDMI mods settings menu. And it's clear that dark areas especially are a lot harder to see through the mClassic if the source is full range. Most other HDMI mods, such as for Dreamcast here, as well as GameCube HDMI adapters, also let you choose limited range. Outside of pure digital-to-digital solutions like those, however, we are severely limited in how we can feed retro consoles into any mClassic. From garbage tier converters like pound cables to actual properly designed line doublers like the OSSC and most devices in the RetroTink 2X series, many of these only output full-range video levels, causing the mClassics to crush shadow details and blow out highlights. Which brings us to Mode 2 on the blue unit, which Marseille calls Switch Enhance. It increases color saturation while crushing and blowing out the black and white levels in pursuit of a contrasty image that is going to make things very difficult to see in almost any game. It looks an awful lot like a limited versus full range mismatch, much like the ones I was just showing, but no, this is just what it does. Could I be making a mistake here though? We already know that the input must be limited range, but what about the output? The left image here is Mode 1 interpreted as limited range, and the video levels are as they should be. We can confirm this with the second image, which is also Mode 1, but the black has become gray due to being misinterpreted as full range. Mode 2, as seen in panels 3 and 4, loses the most detail when interpreted as limited range. But unlike Mode 1, true black is not quite lost when interpreted as full range, although not all shadow detail is recovered. So I can't even guess whether Marseille intends Mode 2 to be interpreted as limited range or full range, but since neither fully fixes the video levels and their own examples on their Indiegogo page and YouTube videos show heavily crushed shadow detail, I have no choice but to conclude that this mode serves no purpose other than to aid and abet video atrocities. Mode 3 on the blue mClassic is perhaps even stranger. Called Switch Enhance Plus, it decreases contrast by raising black levels and reducing white levels while cranking up the saturation to an obscene degree. I mean, okay, sure, maybe it's not like the worst thing ever at this specific angle in a darker, high-contrast game like Astral Chain, but all you have to do is look over this away to where Olive and her pink hair is, and now I've seared all of our retinas. So even if you think for a second that Mode 3 looks okay, or perhaps even good, it will also look really bad within the same game. While Mode 2's output may be slightly less bad if forced to be interpreted as full range, there's no question that Mode 3 is meant to be used as limited range, because full range levels will push white and black even closer to gray. Before we look at Modes 2 and 3 on the green Retro mClassic, what type of content are you even plugging into this thing? Marseille sure wants you to think that the mClassic Retro would be great to use with your SNES, Genesis, PlayStation, and even TurboGrafx 16, with the little old asterisks of requires third-party HDMI adapter. But okay, let's suppose you do have the means to convert a 240p or 480i analog signal from those consoles into HDMI, like with the open source scan converters pass-through modes. Well, the mClassic won't stop you from using digital 240p or 480i, but it cannot actually process or upscale 240p or 480i at all, instead passing the signal as is to your TV or capture card to do what they will with it. So instead, let's feed the mClassic limited range HDMI via a modded console like PS1 Digital or N64 Digital. These mods have powerful scaling of their own, but the mClassic doesn't reduce pixelation much on 240p games output as 720p or 1080p. 480p is the best we can do for getting that effect. But even then, I just am not sure I can see the point in combining Marseille's signature processing with 240p sprite graphics. And for 240p 3D graphics, it's only the N64 with its anti-aliasing that gives the algorithm much to work with for smoothing if that's what you want. So for the most part, it's only the 480p class consoles that you've set up for some form of limited range HDMI output like Dreamcast, GameCube, and Xbox that start to make some kind of sense to use with the mClassic Retro. But at any rate, we've only been looking at Mode 1. Surely the other two modes, called Vintage Retro and Vintage Retro Plus, must do something retro gamers will love, right? Marseille somehow seems to think that the key to making retro games look just like you remember is the colors. Specifically, making the colors look bad beyond belief. As with the blue mClassic, the smoothing, sharpening, and upscaling appear to be either identical or nearly identical between modes 1, 2, and 3. The only tangible difference is that the colors get washed out in modes 2 and 3. Mode 2 is not only radically desaturated, but the black level is raised in such a way that is really annoying and distracting because the parts of the overscan where the game doesn't draw in will become gray next to the pure black seen in the wings of the screen. Mode 3 isn't as bad as Mode 2, but neither is CRT-like or a sensible aesthetic for retro games. Mode 3 can have true black if the source is incorrectly set to full range, but it will not reclaim lost shadow or highlight detail. There is an appeal and purpose and preservation to replicating bad screen technology. DMG, Game Boy, Game Gear, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, I love to play those games with colors so bad they're good. You can use CSC files on the RetroTink 4K to transform colors in such a way that you can turn that purplish sky often seen in digital representations of Super Mario Bros. Into a blue sky that's closer to what a lot of people remember seeing on their own CRT TVs back in the day. So the problem here is that no specific visual target has been achieved with these color transformations other than being potentially similar to some reference CRT that was on its last legs. I understand that it can't be ignored that the upscalers that do go hard on replicating all aspects of the CRT look are significantly more expensive than an mClassic. But the results here are still disappointing because a company with Marseille's history could potentially be uniquely positioned to develop affordable hardware with plug-and-play nearest neighbor or sharp bilinear upscaling, simple CRT masks, black frame insertion, or HDR injection. So next time, I hope they'll embrace the pioneering spirit spoken of in their RGB collection launch video and in the recent interview with Retro RGB to actually create something special for gamers. Until then, one last test. It serves no purpose other than amusement, but several people have begged me to show what happens if you link all three mClassics together. So, wait, what? How? But if that does this, then what happens if I... What the heck? How does... This is... Oh, wait. Whoops, sorry. These are from the RetroTink 4K. There's the result from the ultimate mClassic RGB train wreck. Well, that's fun, I guess.